Hello everyone. Welcome to the Malaysian Students Podcast, a channel established by a few teenagers who aim to utilize this channel as a platform to voice out our thoughts for meaningful topics. So today we have the podcaster Junjie,
Hello, everyone.
so energetic and wishy,
Hello everyone.
with us on stage. So we are going to talk about the accessibility of sexual education in our beloved country, Malaysia. As we all know, sex has been seen as a taboo that most people talk about, given that we are part of Asian culture and the existence of religious barrier. In fact, sex is a part of biology. Even if we are able to avoid talking about this topic, we as humans can't oppose the nature. So most people would have the stereotypes that teenagers without practical sexual experience can't voice up for this issue, but it's definitely incorrect. It's never too young to talk about it since we are in our teenage years and we just hit puberty. It's way more prominent for us to have the awareness on this issue. As well as, without experience doesn't mean we can't discuss its education. A disclaimer here. We acknowledge that the ideologies presented for different issues during the duration of the episode may differ to the listener's opinion. We respect and value your opinion, so please don't feel offended and no offense to any parties and religion. So let's move on to our main content. I personally actually had the experience listening to a mini discussion on sexual education issues in the Clubhouse app. And there was an uncle who emphasized that sexual education is the learning of reproductive organs that we all have learned it in our science or biology school subject. So this is definitely a very common misconception about the definition of sexual education among the society. So today, since we talk about sexual education, first up, what exactly and specifically sexual education is like? What is the content of the education?
So basically, in my opinion, sexual education is education about teaching and learning of a broad variety of topics related to sex and also sexuality. For example, the main content includes the gender identity and also intimate relationship. For example, gender identity, we have basically LGBT, which are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. While the intimate relationships, we are kind of referring to heterosexual, homosexual, and bisexual.
I see. So, in Jin's opinion, like sexual education, is not only including biology but also the gender identities that people should know. There are not only boys and girls exist in the world, but a person can have different gender and it doesn't limit it. They are still normal and we still need to respect them, right?
Yes, true.
Exactly. So the current sexual education system just comprises of, as Felicia said, the reproductive organs and how the hormones work and all. Instead of just seeing from biological point of view, we also have to see it from a psychological point of view. When we hit puberty as teenagers, no matter whether male, female, or any other gender, the hormonal imbalance in our body it determines whether we are going to be male, female, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or others. The school system, for now, it only comprises of teaching how it works, but it doesn't teach us how we can overcome it. So that's what we are trying to raise awareness to through this episode.
I actually do agree with that. Sexual education should be seen in a wider scope, which means psychological part should be taken in consideration as well. Because sexual education is not only merely biology, even though biology is definitely a part of sexual education. Uh, based on based on what I read before, which is the UNFPA United Nations Population Fund document, not what I said, but they acknowledge that, which sexual education includes the aspect of gender equality, the rights of sexual diversity, which is what Jinjie mentioned just now. There are not only boys and girls exist in the world, but there are LGBTQ plus community, and we need to respect all of it. the toxic and unequal power in relationship, um, including like unwanted sex and stuff, because toxic relationship is quite common nowadays, and some people even can't realize that they are in the toxic relationship. So this is what makes sexual education very important, as well as the correct use of condom and other contraceptive method to practice safer sex after the legal age, and the child marriage, gender discrimination, harassment as well. So there are so many things including in sexual education that's not only biology. Another thing that I found it quite interesting to be covered in sexual education, also what I found in the UNFPA document, you guys can look for it in our description because they are linked to access to it. Uh, they say that teaching the teenagers about the natural effect of gender roles and the gender inequality that they're gonna face in the future, like in employment, something make them more prepared for the things that they're going to happen because of their gender. Like I think that's quite interesting. What do you guys think about it?
I agree with your point that it's important to teach them about gender roles when they're during their teenage years, because no matter what we say or whatever we do, right now the domination part is quite biased. In our world right now, men tend to have more power in certain industries, and female tend to have more power in their own in several industries. So whether the biological female or male student or teenager learns about this difference that lies in the world at a very early age, this would help them to get their mind around the fact that not everything is fair.
True.
Gender inequality has been in the world for a very long time, since the beginning itself. During the caveman time, the guys were meant to be the muscular ones going outside to hunt for food, and then the female were seen as people who have to stay in their caves to tend their children. So this has been around for a very long time. If you want to change it in a snap of fingers, it is near impossible. But through effort, it's possible. But for now, if teenagers are taught about it at a very early age, this could help them to navigate through their life. That's what I think.
I think it's valid and true.
Yes, and one thing I want to add on is don't let the gender roles to have the gender stereotype among
Mm,
of us. Yeah.
yeah. That's why I think the way of delivering this concept is actually very important and matters a lot. Like when you teach your kids, right, you could tell them the existence of this thing since the very beginning, but you don't use this like to limit their capacity. Don't say that, oh, women must be emotional and men must be rational, and women must work in any career, men in any career. That's not a good one. You could encourage them to try, but just tell them this thing exists before.
That's true.
True. Don't be like, Johnny, you become an engineer. And then go to the girl, Maria, you have to be a doctor. That's too
Maria.
stereotypical. Okay, so
Yeah.
if any of the listeners have the names, sorry, it was just a random name. Okay.
Let's move on to the next question. In your personal opinion, should schools implement sexual education at the current stage? Like, is that a really necessity for all the teenagers when we are still immature and considered vulnerable yet?
In my opinion, the schools have to implement the sexual education at the current stage, especially for the teenagers about 13 to 18 years old, because during the primary school, schools did teach about the sexual education, but there are a lot of content that students have already forgotten. So they will need to mention back and kind of like make it emphasize how important it is. For example, they have to know about the basic information about pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections, for example, STIs. Like, also, schools should also teach about the how to mingle with the relationships, like what Felicia mentioned, because there are a lot of toxic relationships currently. So actually, schools have certain responsibilities that teach about students how to handle with their relationships, because schools just always ban and just always scold the students who have relationship, but they don't teach them why they have this kind of thing and how to handle them. So I
Yeah.
think schools are responsible for that. Yes.
I personally view sexual education as a necessity as well, because when we don't make sex as an open topic, right, it will just make sex a very mysterious thing. But sex is never mysterious. It's just like a need, a biology, and a knowledge. So that when we just limit it or restrict it, avoid talking about it, it will just trigger adolescents' curiosity to pick up information like from illegal website or from the guy talk, gossip talk, girl talk with friends. And the information we get is not valid and not true most of the time. I don't mean every, but most of the time. And uh, the importance of sexual education, right? I believe that most of our audience or even people surrounding me are living in a satisfying status, like well-off family, which we don't feel the impact without proper sexual education very badly. But if we really follow the news, right, we will know just because we can't see something, it doesn't mean it's not there. There are so many baby dumping cases or abortion cases that teenagers are having, especially in the Asian society. If I'm not mistaken, there was a statistic talking about Malaysian is the highest percentage in the Asian country who is having the baby dumping cases. And it's around 100 babies abandoned every year in Malaysia, which is a very serious thing.
Yeah, that's true. And I think our country can learn from other countries, especially in Europe. For example, Sweden, because Sweden is the first country to make sex and gender education mandatory in schools nationwide. And also they classified the sexual education into four stages, which is very systematic. From lower primary, upper primary, middle school until high school. So there's a flow and very concrete system there. So for example, among secondary school students, they can already have a discussion on how to practice safe sex, such as how to use condoms and how to how to deal with pregnancy, these kind of things. They are very open-minded about that. And also the positive results of sexual education in Sweden are very, very effective. For instance, there has an extremely low rate of sexually transmitted infections across the country, and the infant mortality rate has dropped. Compared to Malaysia, there's a very low rate about infant mortality rate. And also, the age of first sexual intercourse among the teenagers is significantly delayed, and there are low teenage pregnancy also. So that is the effects of implementing sexual education in Sweden. Yep, that's my sharing.
I can
Mm.
already feel some of the listeners are starting to put their hands on their head.
Why? Because of a statistic?
Yeah, because of statistics and some things that Junji just mentioned about safe sex in teenage years. I'm pretty sure there'll be some listeners who feel like this is something that's taboo to not be talked about.
Mm.
As I said in the beginning, right, in the intro, it has been seen as a taboo. By
Yeah.
any means, by some or any way, there will be listeners who think that it is still a taboo to be talked about.
I think most of them think like there is no need for us to learn about how to use condom or the contraception thing because we are not going to practice any sexual intercourse and we are not allowed to practice it at this age. But who
Mhm.
knows? Because of the teenage hormones, because there are so many teenage hormones like testosterone, estrogen, we can't
Progesterone.
control. Yes, not we can't control, but some of the teenagers can't control. So that this is the prevention measures.
Apart from the sexual arousal, without sexual education, we will only know our own gender. Seriously, this is something that I seen with my eyes. If a guy or a girl, biologically male, biologically female, If they only experience their own life without any sexual education, they would not know what the other sex or other gender or other biological gender is actually experiencing. Okay, now let me be real for a second. For guys, guys hit puberty and that will be nocturnal emissions, which is wet dreams, and then there will be some arousals at certain stages lah. That's how I put it. Okay, and then for female, they will hit puberty and then they will have menstruation for their whole life, 50 years, 50, 60 years. Then after that, they'll have menopause. The thing is, if a guy doesn't learn about what a female goes through, he won't know anything about it. Same for female. If they don't learn anything about the guy, they will not know anything the guy is going to experience.
Mm.
This one is one of the main reasons why there's a gender gap. If you go to schools nowadays, you can obviously see a big gender gap between the guys and girls. The guys are sitting in a corner discussing about their own stuff, and then the girls will be in another corner discussing about their own stuff. It's very rare to see friendship between a guy and a girl.
Because you are not attractive enough.
Ouch. That's kind of weird. But yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just
Attraction,
actually, I
attraction,
agree with what you said lah.
Yeah.
It's true.
The gender gap
attraction,
is true.
attraction do play a role, but if you have a good heart, no worries. People will always see you. That sounds so cliche, but it's the truth.
He's trying to recommend himself, so any girls want wish.
No.
Sure.
I wish you
No, no.
already.
What?
Oh,
That's pretty good for me.
I didn't agree. Listeners, don't get wrong impressions of this. You know what? Okay, that's beside the point, lah. Okay,
yeah, I agree
if
with that.
if we
I mean,
show a picture, if we show a diagram with blue color figures on one side and pink color figures on one side, our brain automatically thinks that the blue is male and the pink is female. Yes or no?
Yes.
yes, absolutely.
Who made that? There's no reason for us to think that way. Blue can be female, pink can be male.
It's due to our genes.
Our genes and then
Oh my
the way
god,
we grew up.
ridiculous.
The way we grew up. It's just that the moment we see it, our brains go like reflex mode. Blue is guys, pink is girls, because pink is more feminine and blue is more masculine. So without sexual education, the biologically male and biologically female students or teenagers will not have the awareness of the other genders that lie around. For example, as Junjie mentioned, LGBTQ2 plus community, there has to be sexual education to bring awareness to teenagers since the very early age so that when they grow up, and they become adults of society or leaders if you want, they will have a better understanding and better conceptual knowledge about this.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like from my observation, most of my female friends also don't really know about male reproductive thing aside from the things that we're learning in our biology subject. Since you guys agree with the implementation of sexual education, in your opinion, how should schools implement sexual education when people are still being narrow-minded about it, as well as being restricted by the religious barrier? And what I found out is that um, most of the people would have the stereotype and the stigma of girls having knowledge about sexting. Like most people do think that girls are shy in voicing out about sexual education or anything related to sex, even though it's valid and it's in our biology textbook. But most people will still stigmatize on this issue. Actually, actually, it isn't a fact because it is just depends on whether you exposed to that knowledge or not. It doesn't limited and affected by the gender. Like if you are a girl, then you are shy. It's not something like that because girls can be brave in voicing out anything, even it's about sex, like what I'm doing right now. So yeah, so don't let the gender like limit in talking about knowledge about sex.
Okay, since we're discussing about the possible implementation, we have to take few criteria in account. First of all, our country. When Malaysia, and the majority we have is Islamic followers. And being a multiracial country, we respect their virtues and their teachings. So the implementation that we are going to recommend are completely is aligned with the teachings. So let's start. So the first one we have is appointing young teachers with an open-minded thinking to teach about sexual education. Okay, we're not trying to single out that the senior teachers aren't capable to do this. It's just that the environment they grew up in is very different to the environment that the young teachers have grown up. So it's way easier for the young teachers to adapt to the way of teaching sexual education in a way that is relatable to teenagers. So young teachers would be one of the most ideal candidate to teach about sexual education.
Yes, I agree with you. And also one thing, our Ministry of Education, they should categorize the levels of complexity of sexual education based on students' grades. For example, we can learn from the countries in Europe, and basically they actually categorize the sexual education content into 5 levels, which are which are 4 levels, and one level is starting from our parents, which is during 13 to 24 months. Yeah, I know that's too young, but at least our parents can actually teach their children to recognize all the body parts, including reproductive organs, so they can differentiate male and female physically. I yeah, male and female. Although there are a lot of other gender identity, but parents, they have the responsibility to teach about how to recognize all the body parts. And moving on, when we are in the schools, and especially preschools, after entering the preschools, our kids in Malaysia, they should be taught about the very basics of reproduction, which is sperm and the egg will combine to form the zygote, and the baby will grow in the uterus. Just that. That's very simple. Yeah. So, and one thing that's very important is teachers that should introduce the children about their own their own body cannot be touched without their permission. Yeah, that's all. And after
Yeah.
entering the school, which is primary school, between 5 to 12 years old, yeah, during this time the teachers, they can talk about heterosexual, homosexual, or bisexual, the very basics, imitate relationships, and also there's a range of gender expression there. And one thing is, they should know that gender is not determined by a person's reproductive organ only. Yeah. And also they should be taught about the SITC, which is sexually transmitted disease. Yeah. And also they can, after entering the secondary school, teachers can teach them about how to practice safe sex. For example, how to use a condom. I know, let us think from another way. Why a lot of people, they hate studying? Because they are repeating the same thing every day. And because of this, their curiosity decreases. If our schools also practice the sexual education every week or every day, the students will get more familiar about those knowledge, and this will cause them to be more familiar about what their body is, and also what is sexuality. So because of this can avoid some negative impacts, like they are searching online through some inappropriate websites. We can avoid that by practice this. Yes, that's all my point of views. Thank you.
Yeah, that's quite a comprehensive one. Like I actually attended a seminar talking about sexual education where one of the panelists said that the panelist is the granddaughter of Dr. Mahathir's. I kind of forget the name, but she studied in Western countries since very young, and at the age of 6, they learn about how to wear condom using banana as a practical practical using lah. I mean, they use banana as the. Is that calling experiment?
Substitute.
What ah?
Substitute.
Substitute. Yeah, to learn how to wear condom correctly. And I love the part where they learn the difference between biological gender and psychological gender identities. It can definitely reduce the bullying cases very much because uh, some of the kids nowadays they like to bully people because of their um, masculinity or femininity. Like some of the girls are more masculine, then they just laugh at the girls, and or the boys crying, then they just like say like, "Ha ha, boys cannot cry," or any stuff like that, and that's definitely wrong. That's a one should be corrected about the wrong concept of masculine and feminine trait. About the touching body part, right? Need uh, people can't touch our body without our permission, right? I actually have one thing to add on is that um, besides of school, right, parents also have the responsibility to implement sexual education since very young, like what Jinze mentioned just now. I found out most of Asian families, as well as includes my parents, since the very beginning or very young, I'm educated like not to let people touch my body. But if we really think deeply, when I grow up, I exposed to lots of info over internet. Instead of teaching girls to protect themselves, actually people should teach everyone to respect any genders and not to touch other without their permission, instead of just focusing on to protect ourselves. And I think this concept of asking us to protect ourselves, if it grows like bigger and more radical, it will form a norm of victim blaming, like when the girl is being sexually harassed, then people would just blame like, oh, it's your fault for not protecting yourself. So I think this is the part where school also need to take note as well.
Okay, so the next step we have is use more graphics. I can already see all of the minds are thinking about various stuff. But first, hear me out. There is one example. A teacher, a Dutch biology teacher, she used real life models to show her students where is everything and how they work. It's just not about bringing a model and showing it to them. She dressed up in a skeleton costume once and in a muscular system body once. By showing the students what is where, the students will not have the curiosity or the intention to go into the internet and browse it through. I think all of you can relate to what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like actually, most of the time, it's the curiosity that drove teenagers to do further things. So when we make everything transparent, open, and makes a normalized sexual education by showing them graphics, I do think that help a lot.
Exactly. Curiosity kills the cat, and curiosity
Kills
distracts
teenagers.
teenagers. Not kill, lah, distracts teenagers. So when sexual education is as transparent as it can be, students will not have the motivation or the intent to even go for other resources. If you think about it carefully, when elders tell us to do something, we won't do. But when they tell us to don't do something, exactly when we will start to dig more deeply and start to learn more. So the
Yes.
same concept is exactly same concept is used here. Sexual education has been long neglected so that teenagers, when they reach certain age, they already have the intention to search for it. If it's something very normal, it's like a part of life to them, they won't have the necessity to even go search for it. That's my opinion on this lah.
To add on, school must provide very wholesome and very trustable counseling service for the students so that whenever students meet any problem in terms of like uh, they can't control themselves in the part of sexual arousal or any any other problems that we can imagine, they have a trustable adults to look for and to figure out the solution together. I think having comprehensive counseling service is like super important, especially in school, no matter in what aspect. Even if they meet any problem in terms of like mental, even if it's not related to sex, they can look for the counseling as well. And counseling actually is a backbone of the school because most of the school will just look for the academic result in so that they neglect like this sexual education or students' mental health. But it is super important in order for students to have great academic result as well. And to the most important is to be healthy.
Although in this third question we are talking about the schools, it is very important for the school and the parents to have a good communication. Because
Mm,
just imagine a teenager in his school, he's revealed to the sexual education, and he knows everything in school. When he returns home, if everything is just as same as before, like no one is talking to him about it, if their family still sees it as a taboo, the teenager growing up in the house will not have the sense of belonging.
mm.
Sense of belonging may be a stretch, but still, he won't feel comfortable to share it with others. So the school can actually have a good relationship with the parents about how they're going to teach sexual education and why they think it's necessary for the teenagers to live their life. It is very crucial for the parents and the school to be in a good terms so that the teenager can grow up in an environment, whether at school or at home. Sexual education is a normal thing instead of a taboo.
Yeah. But I think the first obstacle that every one of us need to overcome is that um, the obstacle of being shy and intimidated about talking about sex. Because I believe in the current situation, right, most of the teachers or most of the parents, including like my parents, might be a bit shy to talk about sex openly with children. I mean, what I mean by openly is really open about anything, like uh, about uh, their children's sex desire, a crush, or masturbation, or anything that is normal biological process, but we don't normally talk about it.
I completely agree. We have to overcome the fear of talking to elders about our sexual drives and stuff.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yes.
actually,
But
yeah,
don't you guys think our parents they tend to think like once you grow up, you will automatically know all the knowledge about sex.
yeah, so true.
There was a meme that said, sex is the only thing that our parents don't teach us, but expect us to know by the time we turn 21.
True, that's so true. That's
Yeah.
so true. Even me myself, I tried talking with my mom about this issue, like talking about masturbation. I mean, I did share with her like what I learned in biology about reproduction thing, as well as the I what I learned from the valid channel talking teaching sexual education, which we will share it in our Instagram. So you guys can follow us on the Instagram by clicking the link in the description to check it out. If I'm not mistaken, I've seen not if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure I've seen a video talking about what can parents do if they find out their child is masturbating, and I shared this issue with my mom just in case like if she suddenly find out my brother is masturbating, then she won't be too shocked.
Mm.
And I told her that masturbation is a super normal biological process that parents shouldn't blame or reprimand children for doing masturbation because that's super normal, super normal. And if a teenage boy doesn't do masturbation, then the frequency of him having wet dream is like damn high, then or not damn high, but very high, uh, which is which must I think the most important is the frequency of masturbation. And I told her about this stuff to prepare her for educating my brothers. Yeah, and I personally like I think it's a necessity to know about this because I have two brothers which are still in the teenage years, and I hope they trust me and tell me uh things. Mm. With the availability of pornographic material online and peer pressure to check it out, too many teens fall victim to an obsession with porn. So, in your opinion, what are the practical ways to deal with porn addiction among teenagers? I think Junzi and Rishi are quite experienced because they're exposed to this area of knowledge before. Do you mind sharing more about it?
So porn addiction here I think refers to masturbation among teenagers, and if I'm not mistaken, is quite normal among males, but I'm not sure among females in Asia country.
Mm-mm.
So I think when our teenagers they are exposed to this kind of stuff, they have the tendency to try out the masturbation, and I think there's not wrong about that because this is also one part of the biological growth and the process of growing lah. And but if you if you didn't control well, it will lead to a very serious thing, which is porn addiction. Meaning, if you don't do that one day, and you feel you have a very bad feeling throughout the day. And for some of my friends, they during the initial process of doing masturbation, they're really like obsessed about this and kind of like addicted to porn. But how they overcome this is they try themselves. If 1 week without masturbation, they give them a reward. They give themselves a reward. But but I think it's very hard to control the porn addiction because it's due to the hormone stimulation. But if you exceed the limitation, like you almost do every day and more than one times a day, that is too serious. And I personally think you have to consult the doctor or counselors to seek for help. But if your symptom is not that serious, just try to control yourself. Yeah.
Mm.
So I
Yeah, the
think Rishi to share more about the professional knowledge about this. Yes.
I agree with Felicia about teenagers falling victim to the obsession with porn. Okay, pornography is kind of like as everything related to sex. Pornography is also kind of seen as a taboo. We all know that, and we are addressing it now. As Junjie said, giving reward to yourself is good, but masturbation is a biological event. Biological event, sorry, it's a biological process. Since it's a biological process, just having reward is not going to help. We can see porn in two different spectrum. The first one is where teenagers do in a very controlled regular phase so that they don't get addicted but they're still doing it but under control. The other spectrum is where they are doing it obsessively, like every day, twice as Junjie said. So there is a way to break this addiction. Something becomes addiction only when it becomes a habit. If you do it every day, it becomes your habit, and then when something becomes habit, it's way more difficult to break. So there's a book by James Clear named Atomic Habits. In this book, he doesn't go through about porn addiction. He goes through about how to break habits. So porn addiction is, I won't say it's a bad habit. It's just not a very healthy habit in the long term. So for those of you who think that a teenage guy is going to give you advice, don't worry. This is by a professional and about how to break a habit. The first one would be to make sure to remove all the cues that you have that leads to your porn addiction. For example, even having your phone or whatever gadget you use in your hand when doing something, if you feel that that's your trigger, try to make it lesser and lesser. For example, you have a habit of watching porn in a circumstance that you've come from school or come from some exhausting work. Try to make sure that the gadgets that you use are not present where you can easily access them. If you don't have that trigger, it's highly unlikely for you to go out and take it for you to use. The second one is reframe your mindset. If you think that it's an addiction already and you can't control it, there is a high percent chance you can't control it. But if you can just tweak it a bit and just convince yourself that you're not the person, you're not the type to be addicted to something. It may sound very cliche, but trust me, there's a high chance that you will associate it with your identity. When something is associated with your identity, it becomes very hard for you to do it. The third one is make it difficult. There's something in the productivity world we call as friction, like how much work you have to do in order to do something. For example, for porn addiction, if you have the habit of taking your laptop from your laptop bag and then opening it up and then going through some passwords, when the process gets very difficult, very tedious, there's a high chance you won't do it. The last one is make it unsatisfying. By that, I mean that get an accountability partner. Accountability is a very crucial step in this. It's kind of like one of the last resorts that you have to do. If you have a friend who you can share, it may be a family member, it may be some professional, but whoever it is, if you have someone to keep you accountable, for example, the person comes up and say, "Did you do today? Did you watch today?" And you have to tell them the truth, whether you did or not. There's a high chance you won't do because you are accountable to someone. You have to tell them why you did it and why you did it. So I repeat it twice, and you have to tell them why you did it. These are the 4 steps to kind of reduce your frequency. And even after all this, your obsession did not decrease by a bit. It's time for you to go out to reach out to professionals and try to see how you can overcome this problem. These steps are just for you. If you're in initial stage, try to overcome. But if you can't, then it's time to resort to help. Help may seem terrifying at the moment, but it's very useful. Don't neglect any help you get, as long as it's positive help.
Yeah, as long as the person you look for help is professional and they will keep your information private and confidential.
PNC.
Yeah. And also I think what most of the people thinks that is think okay what most of the people think that is very bad for porn is actually um when people watch porn, right, it's better for them not to treat porn as the source of sexual education, and for them to like as a demonstration for future sexual intercourse, because some of the elements in porn, if I'm not mistaken, that there is like specific themes for porn, and some of the porn with the specific theme will encourage the violence and treat it as a kind of pleasure, if I'm not mistaken. Is it true?
Yeah, actually, based on what I watched about the news, these things mostly happen in Telegram group. Not the like the website starting from P lah. That one is comparatively lesser, based on what I know, because the Telegram group, they have a higher privacy to protect the users' privacy. So some companies that use this function to conduct crime. For example, they will force some of the girls, because they have the hackers to hack their photos through the internet, and they will force the girl to become part of the victim, to share their neck body photos,
Yes.
so that they won't post the photos to the internet. So this will cause a infinite loop, which is very negative, and the girls, they are forced to share more and more. So this will attract some guys, specifically males, to watch, and then they use this to earn money, especially in Telegram
Yeah,
group. I think it's very famous in Korea.
yeah, the end room.
Yeah, yeah, and room.
That
Yes,
that's terrible. That's so terrible. Like, if I'm not
yes,
mistaken, when I watch the news, uh, most of the victims are girls, right? And the one who pay money can request the girls to do anything, even putting cockroach into their reproductive part, vulva. Yeah, and this is like, oh my god, so heart shattering for the girls.
Wow, really? I'm not
Really,
a news kind of guy. Seriously, cockroach? Do they have
yeah,
vagina? Oh, wow.
in insects, and just want
That's
to see them
yes,
being very tortured, and they will get a kind of satisfaction and
this is
happiness.
not
yeah.
satisfaction. This
They
is
will get
just pure
excited.
torture. This is just pure torture.
Those guys are insane, to be honest.
Having
Yeah,
something alive crawling inside you. Ouch. That is
Yes, this is terrible.
actually this explains why sex has been seen. Sexual education has been seen a taboo for such a long time. There are some animals, like a better word, animals or monsters if you want, living in society and they are
rubbish.
you can call them rubbish, but I don't want rubbish to feel offended. But okay, but these people, this is why sex has been taboo. Sex has been seen as a taboo for a
Mm.
long time because
This is a,
there are always people who take it to the extreme, negative extreme. Yeah,
yeah, this is
Mm.
also one of the impact without having proper sexual education to teach and educate and advocate them since the very young age.
it's a
So
loop.
that's why we make this episode. Yeah.
It's a deadly loop. Since we don't
Mm.
have sexual education, people like this are created, and since these people are created, there's no need for there is a stigma around sexual education. We have to break this.
That's all for today's discussion. In sexual education, there should be no secrets. Again, there is no sensitive topic. The one that makes it sensitive is the way of approaching it. Subscribe us to support more meaningful content. And follow us on Instagram because we'll be sharing channels where you can get right info about sexual education like we mentioned just now and for more interesting updates. See you guys next time. Bye bye.